I used to think the sound of a diesel engine was the loneliest sound in the world. Now I know it was my father breathing. Every night, around 10, I'd hear it start somewhere down the hill, one short cough, a long growl, then silence as he let it idle. The window in my room faced the gravel lot behind the lumber yard, and through the curtains I could see the faint orange glow of his truck's cab light. I used to tell myself he was working late, finishing deliveries, the kind of things fathers did when they didn't want their daughters to worry. I was 17 when I started keeping count. 47 nights straight that engine hummed before I fell asleep. I didn't ask questions. He'd already buried Mom by then, and grief turns even simple conversations into minefields. Dad had been a long-haul driver since before I was born. He used to call the road his office with the best view in America. After Mom died, that office became his home. He said he liked the motion, it kept the memories from sticking. But when the company downsized, the runs stopped coming. The house payments didn't. He never said the word foreclosure, but the silence around it was loud. He'd leave every morning before sunrise and come back after I was asleep, pretending nothing had changed. I'd find grocery bags with my favorite cereal on the counter, a few bills folded neatly in an envelope marked for food, and sometimes a new sketchpad. He remembered every detail Mom used to handle. Except his own life. The last night I saw him at home, he made pancakes for dinner. That was Mom's tradition, breakfast for dinner on Fridays. The smell of burnt butter still clings to that memory. He was quieter than usual, stirring batter like it was something fragile. I asked if he'd eaten already, and he smiled without meeting my eyes. You go ahead, kiddo. I'm not too hungry tonight. He kissed the top of my head when I wasn't expecting it. The kind of kiss that feels like goodbye even when no one says the word. Then he took his jacket, his thermos, and left before I could ask where he was going. In the morning the house was colder. His boots were gone, and so was his pillow. I told myself he'd gone on a run, some temporary haul out of state, but deep down, I knew the truck hadn't moved from the yard. From my window I could see it parked under the single streetlight, paint dulled by years of road dust, one mirror held together with duct tape. The windshield glowed faintly with condensation. That's when I started seeing him there every night. Engine off, sometimes on, sometimes with the cabin light flickering as he read something. Once, I thought I saw him holding a photograph. Mom's, probably. The same one he used to keep on the dashboard when she'd ride along. At school, I stopped talking about him. My friends thought he was on the road again, and I let them think it. Easier than explaining that my father, the strongest man I knew, was sleeping in a truck 200 yards from our front porch. The first time I tried to confront him, I chickened out. I walked down to the lot just before midnight, flashlight in hand. The grass was wet from rain, the air smelled like oil and earth. I could see his silhouette through the window, head tilted back against the seat, a flannel shirt draped over him like a blanket. He looked smaller somehow, like grief had whittled him down. I raised my hand to knock on the glass but froze. His mouth moved slightly. He was talking. To someone who wasn't there. I stepped closer. Didn't want her to see me like this, Em, he murmured. She's just a kid. Let her think I'm working. Em. My mother's name. Something inside me cracked. I backed away quietly and ran home, heart pounding, throat burning. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even cry. I just lay awake the rest of the night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the engine start again at dawn. Weeks passed. The world outside kept turning, graduation announcements, college brochures, laughter in hallways, but I was stuck orbiting that one truth. My father was living in his truck because he didn't know how to ask for help. Sometimes I caught him watching me from a distance when he thought I didn't see. At the grocery store parking lot, by the school fence, parked near the diner on Sundays. He'd always wave, casual, like he'd just happened to pass by. But his eyes gave him away, tired, proud, carrying too much. One afternoon, after school, I saw him talking to Mrs. Graham, our neighbor. She looked worried. He looked like a man explaining away shame. When I walked up, she smiled awkwardly and patted my arm. Your father's just making sure you're okay, sweetie. He avoided my eyes. Homework done? Mostly, I said. Good. Keep at it. You'll go farther than either of us. It sounded like a line rehearsed for someone else's movie. I wanted to ask where he was sleeping, but I couldn't do it there, not with Mrs. Graham watching, her pity hanging in the air like fog. So I said nothing. And he left before I could change my mind. That night, a storm rolled in from the west. The sky turned green, thunder shaking the windows. I couldn't sit still. I kept imagining him in that truck, lightning flashing across the glass, rain hammering the roof. Finally, I grabbed my raincoat and ran down the hill. The lot was half flooded. The truck's headlights glowed faintly, wipers beating against the torrent. I banged on the door. He startled awake, then quickly rolled down the window. Jessie? What the hell are you doing out here? Dad, you can't stay in this. The yard's turning into a river. I'll be fine. No, you won't. Come home. His jaw tightened. Holmes paid up for one more week. After that, it's the banks. The words hit harder than the rain. You, what? He rubbed his face, water dripping from his fingers. I didn't want you to know yet. Dad. He sighed, voice breaking. I just needed a little time to figure it out. I got a lead on a job in Kansas. Once I'm steady again. I cut him off. Why didn't you tell me? Because you've got your whole life ahead, kiddo. You deserve to sleep without worry. Let me carry the heavy part. Lightning split the sky behind him. For a moment the whole world froze in white. I saw the exhaustion carved into his face, the deep lines of a man who tried too hard for too long. I reached for his hand through the open window. It was cold, calloused, trembling. Come home, I whispered. He shook his head slowly. Not tonight. Then he closed the window. The engine roared back to life, muffling everything else. When I woke the next morning, the truck was gone. At first, I thought he'd gone for a job lead. But by evening, when he still hadn't returned, dread settled in like fog. I called his phone. No answer. Called again. Nothing. The next day, I found a small envelope taped to the front door. My name on it, written in his slanted handwriting. Inside was a folded note. Only one line. Jessie, if you ever wonder why, look under the seat. I didn't open the truck door right away. For hours the envelope burned a hole in my palm like something alive. I read the line over and over, as if the words might rearrange themselves into a different ending. Look under the seat. It sounded so simple. Too simple for the kind of ache that lived between us. The sun was barely up when I finally walked down to the lot. The world smelled of wet dirt and diesel. Birds picked at puddles, and the truck sat where it always had, a tired giant that had forgotten what it was built for. Rust had spread along the fenders, the side mirror hung loose, reflecting the gray sky like a broken coin. I pressed my hand to the door handle and hesitated. Part of me was afraid of what I'd find. Letters are dangerous things, they can finish a story you're not ready to end. The door creaked open. The cab was cold and stale, filled with the faint sweetness of motor oil and coffee. His jacket was still draped over the passenger seat, sleeves folded neatly like arms at rest. The thermos lay on the floor, empty, the metal dented near the lid. He'd kept everything in order, even in exile. That was Dad. I slid into the driver's seat. The key wasn't in the ignition, but the ghost of its shape was there, worn into the plastic. I sat in silence, my breath fogging the glass, until I reached under the seat. My fingers brushed against paper. Then metal. Then something heavier, an envelope wrapped in a rubber band around a small notebook and an old photograph. The notebook smelled faintly of gasoline and rain. On the first page, his handwriting weighted, lean, uneven, honest. For Jesse. In case the road takes me farther than I can come back from. The first entry was dated a week after Mom's funeral. I could barely breathe as I read. Day 1. The house feels wrong without her. Every wall echoes. Jessie still hums the songs her mother used to sing while cooking. I fix the sink, the fence, the things that don't matter, because they're the only things I know how to fix. Day 12. The company cut the long routes. They offered part-time work, local only. Won't cover the mortgage. I told Jessie we'll be fine. I hope lying counts as love sometimes. Day 23. Sold the sofa. She won't notice, she spends more time in her room drawing. I found one of her sketches, me and Em on the porch swing. We look happy. Maybe art saves what life ruins. My throat closed. I could almost hear his voice reading it. Every line was heavy with the kind of love that hides behind silence. I turned the page. Day 47. They called about the payment again. I told them I'd send something next week. Em's wedding ring is still in the drawer. I stare at it too long sometimes. The shine feels cruel. Day 60. Jessie got accepted to the community art program. She smiled when she told me. It's the first time she's smiled in months. I'll make sure she can go. Even if it costs the house. I wiped my eyes on my sleeve. The ink had bled in places where rain must have seeped through. His handwriting curved softer near the end, as though each word had tired him more. Day 90. The loan officer said we're out of time. I packed my things into the truck tonight. Jessie doesn't need to see the house empty. I'll keep paying what I can. She can finish school. That's enough. Day 92. Sleeping in the cab now. Cold, but quieter than the house. Sometimes I dream she's beside me again, humming that same lullaby. Maybe that's what heaven is, a sound you don't have to chase anymore. I pressed the notebook against my chest, trying not to sob. Outside, the sky had turned pale, the kind of light that doesn't know if it's morning or just the leftover glow of last night. I flipped further ahead, fingers trembling. Day 119. Jessie knocked on the window tonight. Storm rolling in. She looked just like her mother when she's angry. Told me to come home. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I couldn't stand the thought of her seeing the empty rooms. So I lied again. Said I had work. She deserves better than pity. Day 120. The rain sounds like applause on the roof. Maybe heaven claps for the ones who keep trying. I closed the notebook and leaned back. Tears came hot and sudden, like they'd been waiting months for permission. I cried for him, for the lies he told out of love, for every night I'd listened to that engine hum and thought it meant distance instead of devotion. When I looked up again, I noticed something taped to the dashboard, hidden under the sun visor. Another note, shorter, written on a receipt. If you find this before I come back, don't be mad, Jess. I just needed to figure out how to make you proud again. I left the truck door open and stepped out. The wind smelled like rain and pine. I could hear the river from the edge of the lot, the same sound that used to lull me to sleep as a kid. For the first time in months, I let myself imagine what it must have been like for him, sleeping here night after night, staring at the same stars through dirty glass, holding on to promises too heavy for one man. He hadn't disappeared out of neglect. He'd stayed as close as he dared, giving me the illusion of safety so I could keep dreaming. That's what the note meant. If you ever wonder why. It wasn't guilt. It was love. I took the notebook home and sat on the floor of my room, reading every page. Each entry stitched a wound I didn't know I had. He wrote about jobs that fell through, about the night he almost pawned Mom's ring, about how he'd drive around town just to see the lights in our window. Day 150. She's asleep. I can see her curtains from here. Sometimes I think I hear her laugh through the glass. I'd give anything to keep it that way. The last entry stopped midway through a sentence. Day 171. Got offered a long run to the coast. If I take it, I can pay another month. If I don't, we lose everything. Either way, she'll think I left. Maybe that's the price of being a father, someone has to disappear so the other can stay visible, star. The line trailed off into a smudge. I didn't know if he ever made that run. His phone was disconnected. The company hadn't seen him in weeks. But the notebook felt alive, as if his voice was trapped between its pages, waiting for me to listen. I pressed my forehead against it and whispered, I'm proud already. The room answered with silence, but it felt different this time, full instead of empty. Outside, the wind picked up, and for a second I thought I heard the low, familiar rumble of an engine starting somewhere down the hill. Maybe it was my imagination. Or maybe love doesn't end, it just changes the route it takes to reach us. Either way, I listened until the sound faded, and whispered, come home, Dad. The morning after I finished reading Dad's notebook, the world felt different. Not lighter, just clearer, like fog lifting to show a landscape that had been there all along. Every sound carried a memory, the creak of the porch boards, the hiss of the coffee pot, even the rumble of passing trucks on Highway 14. Each one whispered the same thing, find him. The house felt too big without his silence in it. The refrigerator hummed like it was thinking. On the kitchen table, the notebook sat open to the last entry. The words seemed to breathe. Got offered a long run to the coast. I traced the sentence with my finger. It wasn't an ending. It was a direction. By noon, I was at the bus station, backpack slung over my shoulder, the photo from the notebook tucked safely in my jacket pocket, Mom, Dad, and me standing in front of the old blue truck. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew where to start. The company name stamped on the truck door was Grant & Son Freight, out of Clearwater. That was 2 towns over. A faded sticker on his thermos said the same thing, along with a phone number half peeled away by time. It felt like a breadcrumb trail he'd left without meaning to. I borrowed my neighbor's car, an old sedan that shook if you dared to drive past 60. The sky was low and gray, the air heavy with the promise of rain. The road stretched ahead in a straight, endless ribbon. Dad used to say highways were like confessions, long, lonely, and best done at night. I finally understood what he meant. The Grant & Son depot was a yard full of metal ghosts. Dozens of trucks lined up like sleeping giants, some shining, some rusted, all with the same blue logo faded by weather. Inside the office, a woman with sharp eyes and a tired smile looked up from behind the counter. Can I help you? I'm looking for someone who used to drive for you, I said, holding up the photo. His name was Daniel Hart. He might have taken a run out west about 6 months ago. Her expression softened. Oh. Dan. She sighed and leaned back in her chair. Quiet man. Good driver. Always fixed his own rig. Shame about him. My heart skipped. What do you mean, shame? Nothing bad, she added quickly. He just stopped showing up one day. We tried calling, but he didn't have a number that worked anymore. Left a few pay stubs uncollected. Guess he moved on. Do you know where he was headed? She flipped through a binder. Last log we had shows a short run to Seabridge, drop off at a lumber yard near the coast. That's about 300 miles from here. I nodded slowly. Thank you. As I turned to leave, she said, he talked about you, you know. I froze. He did. Every time someone mentioned family. Said his daughter was gonna be an artist. Draw the things I can't say, he told us once. I always liked that. Her words landed like sunlight after a long storm. I drove west that night. The road curved through farmland, small towns, and stretches of forest where the trees seemed to lean in close, whispering secrets. Rain followed me halfway, tapping the windshield in slow rhythm. I kept the notebook on the seat beside me, flipping through it at red lights, memorizing his words like a map written in emotion instead of ink. At a diner outside Seabridge, I stopped for gas and coffee. The waitress was in her 50s, her name tag reading Marlene. When I showed her the photo, her eyes widened. "Well, I'll be," she said. "That man came in here almost every morning for a week. Ordered coffee, black. Sat in that corner booth." She pointed to the back, where a window looked out onto the rain. "Always left the same tip, 2 quarters stacked perfect. Never talked much, just stared at the ocean like he was listening to someone I couldn't see." "Did he say where he was staying?" She thought for a moment. "Yeah. The Coastal Inn down the road. Room 12, I think." "Why, honey? He family?" "Yes," I said quietly. "He's my father." The Coastal Inn was the kind of place that existed only in small towns, cheap rooms, flickering neon sign, and a cat sleeping on the counter. The clerk was half asleep until I showed the photo. "Room 12, he said, voice soft. "He left about 3 months ago. Didn't say goodbye, just handed me the keys and thanked me for the coffee. Real polite guy. Said he was heading north." "North?" He nodded. "Towards Cedar Pass. Said something about hauling lumber back to Clearwater. But I never saw a truck pick him up." "Did he leave anything behind?" The clerk thought, then bent down and pulled out a small envelope from under the counter. "Been holding on to this. Said if anyone named Jessie ever came by, give it to her." My breath caught. He placed it gently in my hand. The paper was yellowed, corners soft, my name written in his familiar slanted handwriting. I sat on the steps outside the inn, rain misting across my face as I opened the envelope. Inside was another note, and a photograph. "Jess. If you're reading this, I guess I didn't make it back as quick as I hoped. The coast is beautiful. The kind of quiet your mother loved. I've been sleeping better out here, listening to the waves. They sound like her laugh when it echoed off the kitchen walls. I didn't mean to leave you wondering. I just needed to find a way to forgive myself for still being here when she wasn't. I promise I'll come home when I do. Dad." The photograph was of the ocean at sunrise. His boots were visible at the edge of the frame, facing the water. It looked like a goodbye frozen in time. I spent the night at the inn, unable to sleep. Every creak of the walls sounded like his footsteps. At dawn, I drove north toward Cedar Pass, the road climbing into fog and pine. The world smelled of salt and wood smoke. At a rest stop near the ridge, I found a truck that looked familiar, old blue paint, duct-taped mirror, the number 17 still visible on the side. My heart stuttered. The doors were locked. But on the windshield, under a wiper blade, was a folded napkin. It had a few words scrawled across it. "Gone for a walk. Don't worry." The ink was blurred by rain. I stood there for a long time, staring at that note until it felt like it was staring back. I called out for him once, voice echoing down the valley. No answer. Just the sound of wind through the trees, and somewhere, far below, the crash of the sea. I wanted to believe he was still close, sitting by the water, thinking of us, maybe waiting for the courage to come home. But a part of me knew he was already part of the landscape. Not gone, just folded into it, the way stories live inside the places they end. That night, back at the inn, I found myself sitting in the same booth Marlene had pointed to. I ordered black coffee, just like him. The first sip tasted bitter, but I drank it anyway, feeling something in me settle. Outside, the waves crashed softly, steady as breath. And for the first time since he left, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt connected, by every mile he'd driven, every silence he'd filled with love too humble to name. He hadn't disappeared. He'd just gone looking for peace. And somehow, he'd left enough of it behind for me to find that I drove home slower than I had come. Not because I was tired, though I was, tired in the way grief exhausts you, quietly, like sand draining out of an hourglass grain by grain. But because I needed time, that I needed to understand what I had found, and what I hadn't. Dad wasn't gone, not in the way people mean when they talk about loss. And strangely, that hurt more. Because death has finality. Absence has teeth. The road back felt longer. The hills rolled like waves, the pine trees swayed like they were breathing. Dad would have loved that drive, the way the highway curved into the world like it belonged there, like it was carved into existence just for men with tired hearts to follow. I played the radio low. Some country singer crooned about leaving and longing, the kind of lazy heartbreak melody that fills empty air without asking too much of you. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I'd expected tears, floods of them. But instead there was this strange stillness inside me, like my heart had finally stopped running. Maybe forgiveness feels like that, not loud or dramatic, but quiet, like the hush after a storm when you realize the power lines are still standing. I reached town by late afternoon. My house, our house, stood exactly as we left it, weathered and stubborn, paint peeling, ivy creeping along the back wall like fingers hoping for a pulse. I sat in the car for a long time before going inside. When I opened the door, the air smelled faintly of dust and something floral. Lavender, maybe. Mom used to tuck little sachets of lavender into drawers, into shoes, into pillowcases. She said scent was memory in disguise. I wondered if Dad smelled it too, sleeping in that truck. Or if he tried not to, because some memories bruise more than they comfort. That night, I didn't sleep in my room. It felt too full of the girl I used to be, too full of expectation, too full of innocence, too full of the version of Dad who never faltered. So I made a bed on the living room floor with an old quilt and a pillow from the couch. Mom used to sew quilts on winter nights, humming under her breath while Dad pretended to follow football. Her stitches were uneven, tiny mistakes hidden in every corner. I used to tease her about it. She'd say, "Imperfections make it real, honey." If that's true, then my father's love was the realest thing in the world. I fell asleep holding his notebook to my chest like it was some sort of life jacket in deep water. In the morning, I called the lumber yard in Seabridge. A man answered, voice gruff, impatient. "Do you know Daniel Hart?" I asked. He paused. "Haven't heard that name in a while." "Tall guy. Quiet?" "That's him," I whispered. "Yeah, he delivered here a couple times. Slept in his truck out back once or twice. Good man. Paid for coffee even when I told him it was free for drivers." I smiled. That sounds like him. He left something once. My breath caught. A letter? No, a sketch. Of the yard. Damn good one. I kept it. Didn't know how to reach him. My heart felt like someone squeezed it gently. Dad drew the sky sometimes. He said pencil could capture light better than a camera if you were patient enough. Can I see it? I asked, voice small. Sure. If you come by again. I closed my eyes. I will. Days passed. I fell into a rhythm, cleaning, sorting bills, cooking simple meals the way Dad used to like, eggs, toast, coffee strong enough to wake the ghosts in the walls. I didn't touch Mom's wedding ring in the drawer. Not yet. Some things you don't face until you can breathe steady around them. Sometimes at night I sat by my window, listening. Hoping, maybe foolishly, that I'd hear the low growl of an engine rolling up the drive. Not because I expected it, but because hope has its own gravity. Once, I thought I heard it, that rumble that always came at quiet hours, the one that used to mean he's near, he's watching, he's making sure you're safe. But it was just a passing truck on the highway. And yet, I didn't cry. There was strength in the ache now, like a muscle rebuilding. A week later, I got mail. Real mail, not bills, not ads. The envelope was plain. The handwriting was not familiar. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Jesse. Met your dad a few months back at a rest stop by Route 12. He shared his lunch with me when he didn't know I had nowhere to go. Told me about you, proudest I've seen a man look in a long time. Said he was heading north to listen to the ocean breathe. I haven't seen him since, but I wanted you to know, he wasn't running away. He was looking for light. For the both of you. A fellow traveler. I held the letter to my chest and closed my eyes. The world is full of strangers who carry each other without ever knowing the whole story. One night, I dreamed of him. He was sitting on the tailgate of his truck, legs dangling, hands folded like he was waiting for someone. The sky behind him glowed the color of dawn, soft and slow. He looked younger, not before Mom died, but before worry became his second skin. He didn't speak. He just looked at me the way he used to when I was little, brushing dirt off my scraped knees, saying I could do anything, be anything, as long as I kept trying. I woke up crying, not from pain this time, but from warmth. It felt like a blessing. Sometimes healing arrives quietly. Not as an answer, not as closure, but as permission to continue. I started drawing again. Small things at first, hands, coffee cups, truck mirrors. Then landscapes. Then portraits from memory. Dad said I'd draw the things he couldn't say. Maybe this was the way back to him. One evening, I took his notebook to the truck yard. The sky was purple, dusk spilling across the pavement like paint. I sat behind the wheel, closed my eyes, and whispered, not to the empty seat, but to the air that still smelled faintly of engine grease and winter. I'm not mad, I said. I never was. I just needed to know you didn't leave because you stopped loving me. The silence was soft. Comforting. Like someone adjusting a blanket around your shoulders. I left a drawing on the passenger seat, a sketch of the truck under a night sky, headlights glowing like hope. I whispered goodbye, but it didn't feel final, more like a comma. Not end of a sentence, just the pause before the next one. The first real rain of spring came the morning everything changed. It started as a whisper against the roof, a soft tapping that grew into rhythm, like fingers drumming on a table, or the heartbeat of someone you love when you rest your head against their chest. The world outside my window blurred into silver. For the first time in a long while, it felt like the earth itself was washing something away. I brewed coffee the way Dad used to, too strong, a spoon of sugar just to make it human. The smell filled the kitchen, rich and grounding. Then I sat at the table with his notebook open in front of me, the pages curling at the edges, his handwriting fading slightly where my tears had fallen days ago. I'd read every line by now, but I still found new meaning each time. Love does that, it expands in you, turning the same words into new truths every time you're ready for them. That morning, as rain softened against the glass, I realized something. I'd been waiting for him the way he once waited for Mom. I'd been living in pause. But maybe love wasn't meant to be an anchor. Maybe it was a map, one you had to keep walking. So I made a choice. I would drive to the coast again, not to chase him, not to search, but to see what he saw. The ocean he wrote about. The one that made him remember laughter. I wanted to know what kind of peace could make a man finally forgive himself. The highway shimmered wet under gray light. Water clung to the tires, flung up in small explosions that caught the air like silver confetti. Every few miles, I passed another truck, anonymous, distant, and each time I whispered quietly, "Be safe." Dad. It became a ritual, a prayer, a conversation I no longer needed an answer to. By the time I reached the coast, the clouds had started to break. The horizon stretched endless and pale, the sea restless and alive. The air tasted like salt and distance. There was a small pull-off by the cliffs where the road ended, just a dirt patch overlooking the water. And there, almost hidden by wild grass and weeds, was the same old blue truck. My chest tightened. It looked smaller now, like the years had folded it inward. One tire was flat, the paint duller than I remembered. The windshield reflected the sky, a mirror of moving clouds. I stood there for a long time before opening the door. Inside, the air smelled of salt and metal and faintly, heartbreakingly, like him. On the passenger seat was a new notebook. Clean cover. No dust. Tucked inside the front flap was a note, folded once, Jess. If you found this, it means you were brave enough to look again. I never meant to disappear. I only meant to stop being a burden. I thought distance would protect you, but all it did was remind me how much I'd already lost. I've been sleeping by the water these past months. I like to think your mother's here, in the waves, scolding me for being a fool. I hear her laugh in the wind sometimes. Maybe that's what forgiveness sounds like. I wanted to write this before I went further north, there's a job there, maybe another chance. But if not, know this. You were never the reason I left. You were the reason I kept going. Dad, I read it 3 times before I could breathe properly again. Then I looked out over the water, and I swear, I saw movement on the shore. A figure walking the edge of the tide, boots dark with salt, head bowed. It could have been him. It could have been memory. It didn't matter. I whispered, it's okay, Dad. You can rest now. And in that moment, the wind shifted, soft, warm, wrapping around me like a blanket. I closed my eyes and let it hold me that I stayed by the truck for hours. When the sun finally broke through the clouds, light flooded everything, the ocean, the cliffs, even the rust on the truck gleamed like gold. And I understood. He had never truly left. He'd just found a quieter way to stay. Before I drove away, I took his new notebook and placed my drawing inside it, the one I'd left unfinished, of him and the truck beneath the night sky. Then I closed the door gently, as if tucking someone in for the last time. A year later, I had my first art exhibit in town. I called it The Long Road Home. Each piece was a story, of the truck, of the rain, of the little moments that make us human. One drawing showed a man sitting by the ocean, notebook open, looking toward a light just beyond the horizon. Underneath it, I wrote. Some people leave to protect us. Some people stay by letting go. Love isn't always where we expect it. Sometimes it's parked just down the road, waiting for us to find it again. When the exhibit ended, I donated the proceeds to a driver's fund for families who'd lost someone on the road. It felt right. Like finishing his route for him, sometimes I still drive out to the cliffs. The truck's gone now, towed away or claimed by the sea. But I always park in the same spot and watch the horizon turn from blue to gold to gray again. And when the wind picks up, I can almost hear it. The low hum of an engine starting, steady and familiar, heading somewhere far but never gone. I whisper. Keep driving, Dad. And somewhere, in the distance, I swear I hear him answer. Always, kiddo.